unforgiving. The C segment of cars, or as they're better known as in America, compact cars, are an institution and even a cornerstone of Europe. Even if SUVs and crossovers have eaten away at their market share in recent years, compact hatchbacks and wagons have played a crucial part in the European car market for decades. In 2008, for example, C-segment compacts made up 36% of all new cars sold in Europe that year. More than a third of all cars sold belonged to this segment. This has historically led manufacturers from other regions to design and produce hatchbacks, wagons, sedans specifically for Europe. The Kia Ceed, for example, which is an acronym for Community of Europe with European Design. It has the word Europe twice in its name. That's how important Kia considered this car to be for their success on the old continent. Nonetheless, as was also the case in Africa for the longest time, who ruled in Europe were Europeans. Fiat, Ford, Citroën, Opel all dominated sales charts from year to year. Just as a few examples, from 1982 to 1989, Ford's Escort was Britain's best-selling car, taking a break for a few years until 92, when it once again claimed the top spot until 1995. A few kilometers away, in the Netherlands, Opel claimed the top spot for nearly 20 years in a row, first with the Kadett and later with the Astra. But none of this is to mention the big one, the daddy, the leader, the Volkswagen Golf. The perennial candidate, Volkswagen's Golf was annually the best-selling car in the whole of Europe, starting from 1983 and holding on to that position for each successive year from there on out. Any and all new compact family cars looking to enter this market will immediately be pitted up against the Golf. Perhaps they'll be called a Golf killer. Perhaps they'll get rave reviews and win dozens of awards. But none of them will outlast the Golf. It will always come out on top. So imagine the shock when in 1997, Europe's best-selling car ended up being the Fiat Punto. Yes, a class smaller than the Golf, competing with the likes of the Polo and Fiesta instead, but still, the Golf was kicked from the top spot. It's not often that a single year can redefine an entire segment, but 1998 wasn't just another year, it was a collision point. 1998 was going to be important for every manufacturer, a point after which no one would get second chances. While they were preparing to unveil the next generation of Golf, hoping to retake their mantle, Ford was readying its Escort replacement. When the current Escort had launched, it was a dud. Pretty bad. Terrible. And thus completely ignorable. This new Escort was going to be something that you had to have an opinion on. A car with innovative styling which nobody would have expected from Ford, the makers of, well, the Escort. This company needed to gain back the trust lost after selling this thing for 8 years. Then there's Opel and Vauxhall, who had the honor of having to replace their best-selling model of all time. More than 4.1 million Astra Fs were built in total, the most produced Opel ever, and 1998 would be the year it would be replaced. How the hell do you follow that up? Fiat's Punto was the one to beat the Golf in terms of sales. But what about Fiat's actual Golf competitor? The Bravo and Brava twins had been released in 1996 with big ambitions. You see, while the Italian firm had always excelled in the B segment with cars like the Punto and Uno, their C segment offerings never really reached the peaks that the likes of Ford and Opel had gotten to. I mentioned the 4.1 million units that the Astra F reached. Fiat's contemporary competitor, the Tipo, sold less than half that amount. With the Bravo and Brava, they would try their damned hardest to fix that. 1998. Fiat had to prove themselves, Ford had to reinvent themselves, Opel had to follow up their best-selling car, and Volkswagen had to follow up Europe's best-selling car. This would be the year that would define the compact segment forever. The Fiat Ritmo was introduced in 1978 as their staunch competitor to the Golf. While initial prospects seemed high, the success of the Ritmo eventually suffered in the hands of quality problems, including a notorious tendency to rust and plenty of electrical issues. By the end of its production run, the company had sold about 2 million Ritmos and Stratas. A strong number, but not quite what Fiat was hoping for. When coming up with a replacement, Fiat would take the task very seriously, launching the Tipo in 1988 as their staunch competitor to the Golf. While initial prospects seemed high, the success of the Tipo eventually suffered in the hands of quality problems, including a tendency to just fall apart, and plenty of electrical issues. By the end of its production run, the company had sold nearly 2 million Tipos. A strong number, but not quite what Fiat was hoping for. When coming up with a replacement, Fiat would take the task very seriously, because their previous endeavors in this segment really weren't as successful as they should have been, a segment that accounted for about 30% of the European market at the time. Fiat struggled to gain a foothold in the class when they were ambitious and daring, and they struggled when they were sane and practical. For the follow-up, Fiat once again tried a completely new route: sex. When determining customer needs for the new car, personalization was key. As it turned out, there were a lot of potential customers, all with different needs and desires. With that, the decision was made to use one platform to make two distinct models. Usually, 3- and 5-door hatchbacks were identical in basically every way, aside from the amount of doors they had. This time though, they would be designed with different customers in mind, gaining unique body shapes and rear-end treatments, different instrument clusters, and even different names. The 3-door would become the Fiat Bravo, the 5-door would be called Fiat Brava. Ital Design were put in charge of designing these two, the same firm who had previously worked with Fiat in designing the original Fiat Panda, the Chroma, the Punto, and others. The Uno, the Duna, and now the Bravo Brava. What Ital Design presented was definitely in the mold of the smaller Punto, perhaps a bit rounder and bigger, even surprisingly Teutonic. With the designs done, all that was needed was final approval and further development could commence. They were not approved, as Fiat's higher-ups felt that what was needed was something with more Italian flair, more style. To achieve something quintessentially Italian, they appointed a German as head of the design department, Peter Fassbender. I think. I've seen about 3,000 to 4,000 different men be credited as being the designers of either the Bravo, the Brava, or both, including Chris Bangle. What I do know is that Fiat's in-house style center ended up producing a very striking set of twins, again reflecting their different target markets. The 3-door Bravo, with its sporty looks, was looking towards young families or singles, particularly single men. The Brava, more sensible, targeted families and particularly women. Even the color choices were distinguished between the two. Brighter tones for the 3-door, more classical and tame colors for the 5-door. Debuting with these models were a lineup of new engines. Adjusted for inflation, Fiat spent more than 1.7 billion euros engineering a brand new set of modular engine families. At launch, base models would be equipped with a 1.4-liter 4-cylinder. While moving up the price ladder, the Brava could be had with an upgraded 1.6, an option that was not available on the 3-door variant. Instead, you had to go for the highest end trim to receive the new 1.8-liter, something that was optional on the Brava. You also had a choice of diesels. All models would be equipped with independent suspension all around at both the front and rear, something that was basically unheard of in this segment. These 4-cylinders were later joined by the hot 147 horsepower Bravo HGT and its 5-cylinder powertrain, capable of taking the car to a top speed of 213 kilometers per hour. That was quick, I promise. Fiat didn't splurge the money on just the engines either. They wanted to get rid of the quality problems that had plagued the Strada and Tipo before. So they made a big thing of promising that this time around things would be different. 90% of the exterior body panels would be galvanized, and special care would be taken to ensure the overall reliability and quality of the car. Perhaps on the back of these promises, the Bravo Brava achieved what the Tipo had done 7 years earlier and was awarded the title of European Car of the Year. Initial reception was just like the Nissan NX. Fantastic. Reviewers raved about the good looks, great handling properties, and buyers actually showed up. In just a couple of years, Fiat would ship more than 700,000 Bravo Bravas, a strong result, and they would be joined by a few other models sharing the same platform, the Marea sedan and wagon and the Multipla MPV. Combine this with the massive success of the Punto and things were looking up for Fiat. Their new generation of stylish hatchbacks might just finally beat Ford, Opel, even Volkswagen at their own game. The year was 1990 and Ford's brand new Escort was terrible. Ancient engines, a worse interior, horrible handling qualities, and outdated styling. This deficient thing was a poor attempt at making a car and came off as a bit of a shock, as Ford's European division had a talent of making good stuff from very little. While they were never the most exciting cars, you could always bet on a Ford being efficient, reliable, competitive, good. This wasn't, leading Ford to update it quickly in hopes of not hopelessly destroying their compact car reputation. And then they updated it again. But by the time the 95 Escort entered showroom floors, Ford was well into development of a successor. The idea of a world car is simple. It's a car for the world. It's a concept that has been attempted countless times by countless manufacturers. Design one model that suits the needs of markets across the world with minimal changes between them, allowing the manufacturer to save money on development and production costs. And most of the time, they fail. Customers from differing markets simply demand different things. The Fiat Palio was a massive success in South America, but tanked in Europe. Ford themselves had made an attempt at launching a true world car recently. The Mondeo in Europe became the Contour for America. Being a massive success in the former continent didn't translate to great sales in the US, selling less than half the amount of cars each year that they expected to sell. This didn't deter Ford when it came to the Escort's replacement though, as this new car wouldn't just replace the European one, but the American Escort as well. This was going to be an important model for Ford. The New Age compact would adhere to the New Edge design philosophy employed by Ford of Europe at the time, first introduced on the cap. Rounded forms that intersected with sharp edges and geometric shapes, creating strong creases in the bodywork, providing almost concept car looks. Coming off of earlier 1990s design trends, New Edge was immensely forward-looking. From the get-go, this new hatchback was going to stand out from its crowded set of competitors. Just bask in the glory of this lineup of design studies. While the designers were tweaking the final design, Ford's engineers set out to do their job properly this time. The underpinnings of the all-new platform would leave no room for this car to be a slouch. This was specifically designed to be a driver's car. Just like Fiat would do with the Bravo, Ford installed independent suspension at the rear end, a form of multi-link suspension marketed by Ford as a control blade system. This system was mounted in a steel subframe bolted directly to the underbody for increased stiffness, also decreasing total size and manufacturing complexity. But that isn't as important as the fact that the suspension design would result in this car handling like a right old bugger. It would be a genuinely fun car to drive. Also in part thanks to a lineup of C-Tech and Duratec engines, some of them borrowed from the bigger Mondeo and some of them designed specifically for this new model. In most markets, the lineup would consist of a 1.4-liter at the bottom of the lineup, a 1.6, 1.8 and 2-liter 4-cylinders, while in America the range would range from a 2-liter to a 2-liter engine. In a forward-looking move, ABS would be standard on all models. Less than 30 years ago, that was a noteworthy thing. Meanwhile, the design team was finishing up with their final touches, including the interior, where the ashtray was placed particularly high, enabling the driver to use the ashtray without removing their hands from the steering wheel. A special accommodation for the design director, Claude Lobo, who was a, let's say, heavy smoker. Around this time, Ford's vice president of design and one of the pioneers of New Age design, Jack Telnack, was retiring, with Jay Mays brought in from Audi and Volkswagen as his replacement in mid-1997. As a new man in charge of important things, Mays went down to Europe to check on what the team had come up with for the upcoming international model. As he arrived, he witnessed it. By God, the team had come up with something actually interesting and extremely striking. Just as a reminder, this is what they were replacing. Jay Mays, aghast at what he was seeing, was having none of it. A car as mainstream as this, with these looks, was setting Ford up for controversy. Lord only knows what he must have thought about this. As his very first project, Mays set about trying to quickly give the project an emergency facelift before launch, with this being his final approach for its design. Could you tell he came from the Volkswagen Group? But alas, it was too late. The car was going into production in a matter of months, and this drastic a change would have been impossible to implement under reasonable circumstances. Ford's new compact car that would be revealed to the public in just a few months would look like this. Now it was time for one simple question. What was it going to be called? As late as 1997, journalists seemed to believe that it would retain the Escort name, but by this time Ford knew they wanted to distance themselves from the previous lineage, and after 30 years was ready to retire the name. Journalists were desperate to find out the new name, but as a matter of fact, not even Ford's own people knew what it was going to be called. That decision would come down to the company's VP and head of automotive operations, Jacques Nasser. The 1998 Geneva Motor Show was where the car would be officially revealed to the press and the public, with Ford prepping for this moment for months. And some more months. Photos had been shot and press kits had been prepared, awaiting final word on what the name would be from the big boss. A few names had been shortlisted, including Jazz, Focus, Icon with a C and a K, and Fusion. Nasser didn't want to give the name out too early in fear of it being leaked to the media, so it came down to the night before the big show.
And I know no one here is interested in the new name.
A dinner held for the bigwigs at Ford. Nasser spotted one of Ford's senior PR guys and summoned him with a flick of his finger.
Let's focus.
Volkswagen, or the people's car. Thank God they managed to live up to that name, or else it would have been extremely ironic. Europeans couldn't get enough of Volkswagens. The Golf had been, after all, the very best-selling car on the entire continent since 1983. The current Golf, the Mark III, originally launched in 1991, was close to selling nearly 1 million cars each year, on the back of a reputation for quality, reliability, and that usual VW sensibleness. It was a car developed under the watchful eye of longtime chairman Karl Hahn, with design overseen by longtime designer Herbert Schaefer. Two people who had arguably played an instrumental part in shaping the Golf into what it had become, a continued success story. But by 1993, the winds had suddenly dramatically changed. As development of the next generation of Golf was about to begin, Karl Hahn would be replaced at the top by Ferdinand Piëch. You probably know the guy, so I'm not gonna dwell on that. Meanwhile, the Golf's longtime designer, Herbert Schaefer, the man who had proclaimed only Herbert Schaefer and Giorgetto Ciucciario can design a Golf, was out. Hartmut Vakus would be his replacement. The Golf was under new management. These two men and the teams of people working on the project would have to take on Volkswagen's Golden Goose. A tall order for any person, but Piëch knew what he wanted from the 4th generation car. 1. From the get-go, he made it very clear to Vakus his design team could explore any avenue they wanted with VW's lineup, except for the Golf. That was sacred. And 2. Piëch was a man obsessed with quality.
Quality comes first. Every time we are a little bit better than the time before, it is simply experience.
His simple goal for the car was to make the finest quality hatchback in the world. You see, Piëch had a differing philosophy to other automotive executives. Parts and powertrains and whatnot would usually be designed to be as cheap to produce as possible, with these parts then making their way from cheaper cars to pricier, more higher-end models. Piëch turned this formula upside down, where development would be done at the top of the company's lineup, and with that, the higher quality parts would trickle down from luxury cars over to basic economy cars. In contrast with its competitors, the main point of attention with this car would be the interior. It's perhaps difficult to express this over visual media, but the Golf marked an upgrade in interior quality that had never been witnessed before in this segment. The materials were soft to the touch from the front to the rear seats. Elements like the door handles were finished in chrome. The grab handles, also known as the handles, returned to their position smoothly instead of just smashing back into the headliner. You know what else this thing debuted? ISOFIX. This was the first ever car equipped with ISOFIX anchor points. All of this is to say that the attention to detail was exquisite. And it is by no means an exaggeration to say the interior quality and refinement of the Mark IV Golf was on par with Mercedes's and BMW's of the era, perhaps even surpassing them when you compare it to Mercedes's entry into the C segment, the original A-Class. This attention to detail carried over to the exterior design as well, which was kind of the opposite of what Ford was working on. The Focus would be radical, the Golf would be sensible. That's not to say it didn't innovate. This was, after all, one of the very first cars in the world with clear headlights. Such a seemingly small detail that makes a car look infinitely more fresh. Volkswagen designers continued with their newly introduced Bauhaus-inspired design language, something that deconstructed car design down to the bare essentials. Clean, sleek panels and lines that removed anything unnecessary, combined with immensely precise and uniform panel gaps. As Bob Lutz once shared,
I congratulated Piek on the superb panel fits of his new cars. He told me, "You want this at Chrysler? Here's how it's done. Call everyone who's part of Body Precision into your office. Tell them you want 3mm body gaps in 6 weeks or they're all fired."
A charming man. The lineup would be comprised of a 3-door hatch, a 5-door hatch, a wagon, and a convertible, but kind of not a convertible. Instead of spending exorbitant amounts of money developing a brand new version of a rather niche model, VW instead stuck the new front end on the old Mark III convertible, changed the boot lid, and sold it alongside the new lineup. The sedan would once again be sold as the Jetta in America and as the Bora in the rest of the world. In certain European markets, they would actually sell the Golf Estate and the Bora Estate alongside each other, with the Bora being the more exclusive, luxurious model. The choice of engines would be vast, with the range starting off with a 1.4 liter, then continuing on with a 1.6, 1.8, 2-liter, 2.3-liter VR5 5-cylinder, a 2.8-liter 6-cylinder, and a bunch of 1.9-liter diesels. The modified 1.8-liter that would be fitted into the GTI would be the first time a petrol-engined Golf was turbocharged, and that's about the only notable thing you can say about the GTI. The fourth generation was revealed at the tail end of 1997 at that year's Frankfurt Motor Show, and pulled the rug from under every other manufacturer's feet. You know, other manufacturers like... Opel's compact offerings, the Kadett and its replacement, Astra, had always been important for Opel. The Kadett D was GM of Europe's very first front-wheel drive car. The Kadett E was badged under about 500 different names worldwide. And the 1991 Astra F ended up selling more units than any other Opel up until that point. It was always their anti-Volkswagen car, priced a bit more competitively but lacking in some of the refinement. A strong all-rounder, pretty good in all areas without excelling in anything particular. And yet, the Astra proved to be popular as hell. In 1992, for example, it was Europe's second best-selling car. I guess you could call it a silent killer, in it that it was always stealing sales from Ford, VW, Renault, you name it, but you may not actually realize how popular it truly was. Still, how do you replace this success story? The common adage would be to take what you have and then make it better. And that's exactly what Opel, and by extension Vauxhall, did. The old car rusted like it was manufactured under seawater. Well, the body of the new one would be fully galvanized, a first for an Opel. The previous Astra handled like a bag of wet carrots, so the body of the Astra G would be twice as rigid. Alongside that, Lotus had a hand in developing the chassis, and they spent time on engineering the 1.6 4-cylinder. In fact though, that was one of just 8 different engine options available at launch, including even a 1.2-liter 4-banger. This exemplifies fantastically one of the main selling points of the Astra, or how Opel and Vauxhall managed to sell so many of them. There was an Astra for everybody. A 3-door hatchback, a 5-door hatch, a wagon, a sedan, a van, a coupe, and a convertible. They had every base covered, and this was good news for fleet buyers. You know, businesses and governments who buy cars in bulk for employees or as cop cars, etc. The range was to be extended even further in the coming years as the hot Astra OPC would be introduced later on. And when it hit the market, the Estate OPC happened to be the fastest compact estate car ever, hitting a top speed of 240 kilometers per hour. It's safe to say Opel and Vauxhall were confident in the new Astra. It was, in basically all regards, a big improvement over the previous one, offering a massive lineup infused with modern styling. This was a great effort from Opel. They'd have no trouble going up against Ford's Escort and that boring Golf. Wait a minute. From its launch, the Fiat twins were performing rather well. Not as well as the Punto, Fiat's sales leader, but still, it was a success so far. But was this because the car was really good? Or did the fact that most of its competitors were aging when it came out play a part in it? Opel's Astra, the Golf, the Citroën ZX had all launched in 1991, the Peugeot 306 a few years after that. These were cars that were, by this point, more than halfway through their life cycles, meaning Fiat really had struck gold with the timing here. As the others were beginning to look archaic, the fresh-faced twins looked supremely modern. It could be said that Fiat's main rival at this point was Renault's new Megane, which was similarly split up between the 3- and 5-door hatches, as the less practical Megane was marketed as a coupe instead and not even as a hatchback. Seemed to work, the Megane became a big success for Renault. But for Fiat it had to be nerve-wracking knowing that in just a few years' time all of the sales leaders would be replaced by new models. What they had to do was stick to the core qualities they designed the Bravo Brava after: quality, style, and handling prowess. If the car buying public knew that Fiat was a leader in at least one of these departments, they might just have a chance. Then 9/11 happened. The 1997 Frankfurt Motor Show, beginning on the 11th of September, was quite possibly the most important automotive event in human history. All the stars are here: Helmut Kohl, Fiat's Bravo, Renault and the Megane, but more importantly, it was the world reveal for 3 new C-segment cars. First up, Citroën and the ZX replacement, the Sara. Looks boring and doesn't stand a chance because Peugeot gets all the cool stuff and Citroën is forced to play second fiddle. Next up, Opel. The new Astra looks sharper, it's been designed with Alias software after all. The body is stronger in all regards, and there's a whole heap of powertrains on display. Word is, in addition to the current body types, Bertoni will be designing and producing both a coupe and a convertible. It's hard to express properly just what a revolution the Mark IV Golf was. I'm not a native speaker, so it's even harder for me. I'll just say that the fit and finish, the material choices, the detailing wasn't just high-end for a compact car, it was high-end, period. Ferdinand Piëch had accomplished what he set out to do. He made the Golf an object of desire. Other automakers took immediate notice as they knew the standard bearer was now even standarder bearer. But in all of this, you gotta feel bad for Opel. The very day they announced their new Astra to the world, it gets overshadowed by Volkswagen. Not only that, the Golf would get a head start as well, as it would already go on sale at the tail end of '97. whereas the Astra would reach showroom floors next spring, giving the Golf nearly half a year before Opel would even start selling the Astra. However, luck turned out to be on Opel's side. You see, making cars is actually really hard, and Volkswagen ended up having trouble with ramping up Golf production up to normal capacity. Customers in mainland Europe weren't getting their hands on cars, while the launch of the right-hand drive UK models was delayed until the spring. In January, Volkswagen's compact dropped to number 8 in the European sales charts. Such a low placement was, by this point, unprecedented. The Astra would reach the market a few months later and became a smash hit. From September onwards, it would rank as the second best-selling car on the continent, right behind the Golf, which reclaimed their number 1 spot in May. During this hectic period, we can't forget what Ford was about to do.
One thing is absolutely certain. It is gobsmacking gorgeous.
Because I think the Ford Focus looks awful.
I can see why they put it in the middle of a lake. It's incredible. I mean, they've completely blitzed the hatchback market at a stroke.
You might love the Focus, you might hate the Focus. What you won't feel is nothing towards the Focus. It's a car you had to have an opinion on, a daring move in such a competitive segment, but one that Ford was hedging their bets on. And it couldn't have come at a more impactful time. In the compact C segment, there is one year which splits its history in two. That year is 1998, no point in trying to hold any suspense here. There was before 1998 and after 1998. The Golf by sheer quality and refinement, and the Focus with its radical design and excellent driving dynamics took the C segment to levels never seen before. No longer was it just about practicality, comfort, price, it was about identity, even style. How you were perceived became the defining factor. In all of this, how's the Fiat twins doing? Well, let's go back to those 3 points it had to hold and defend. Quality, style, and handling prowess. So, quality, nope.
We were all rather hoping those luscious, highly strung Italians had got better built with time.
But you tell us, the latest generation of Fiats and Alfa Romeos are just as appallingly badly built as they always have been.
In the general public's eyes, that mantle was easily taken over by the Volkswagen. What about style? Whatever you may want to say about the good looks of the Fiats, the rounded styling seemed almost antiquated when compared directly to the sharp curves and points of the all-new Focus. Overnight, it stole the Bravo's thunder and left it in the dirt. So, handling prowess. Well, that title was stolen by, obviously, the Focus again. Alright, I have to cut the Astra some slack. It was a pretty fun thing to drive thanks to that Lotus engineering. Way better than the Astra preceding it. And if even an Opel can compete with you in this department, what kind of a chance do you even have after this? The Fiat Bravo and Brava would appear in the top 10 bestsellers list in early 1997 and wouldn't be seen so high up ever again. 1999 would finally bring on the big battle. The first full year of sales for Ford's Focus, Opel Astra and the Volkswagen Golf. Renault was meanwhile making big strides and eating up the market thanks to the introduction of their Megane Scenic, an MPV based on the compact platform. In fact, the Scenic accounted for half of all Megane sales, allowing the nameplate to become the second best-selling car in Europe for '98. But what about the big three during 1999? A new entry at number 5 in the year-end sales charts is the Focus with 472,000 units sold. Either you love it or you hate it, and that unfortunately does mean quite a few people hated it. At 4, the Renault Clio, and another Renault lands at the 3rd spot, the Megane and Scenic. Coming at number 2, Opel and the Astra line up with 683,000 total sales. And holding on to the number 1 spot, it's obviously the VW Golf, scoring a massive 703,000 unit sales. A bit of an underperformance from the Ford, perhaps, but fortunately, they had an ace up their sleeve. Remember how this was going to be a world car? Well, luckily for them, they actually succeeded in making a world car. It went on sale in the States for the 2000 model year and immediately shot up into the top 10 best-selling cars list there as well. Now, as far as I know, there are only 2 cars in history that have hit the top 10 in both the US and Europe in the same year: the Focus and Tesla's Model Y. Style was in. In the years that followed, Europe's C-segment landscape settled into a new world order. Once the dust had cleared, 3 names stood above the rest. The 4th generation car cemented the Golf as the immovable leader of the pack. If it were to fall, everyone else would be long dead by then. As it ruled, the rest were forced to chase for 2nd place. Opel's Astra and Ford's Focus rounded out the big 3. One was a sensible all-rounder, the other a more dynamic and exciting choice. Sure, some challengers shined brightly for a moment, Renault introducing the compact MPV to the world with the original Megane, or the innovative MPV-styled Peugeot 307, but these were simply brief sparks. The 307's successor, the 308, was not innovative. It sucked. And then there's Fiat. They didn't get to have another brief spark. As was the pattern, the daring Bravo was replaced by the Germanic Stilo, which was such a success that Fiat managed to lose money on every single one they sold. Their current offering, the Tipo, is kept alive by its popularity in one market and one market only, that being Turkey, which should tell you that in Europe's most important segment, Fiat really never succeeded, and at the same time never recovered. Today, the C segment takes up 14% of the European car market, less than half of what it managed less than 20 years ago. That sucks. Mida kauem see video kestab, seda laisemaks editeerimine läheb. And thank you so much to all of our new Corsi members. You know them, people like Samuel Larner, Origin 3553, Yajat Yadav, Haza Walker 9, Garv, TCR, The Real Huddlist, Eduardo Perez, sorry Corsica for making and it cuts off, oh well, MD, Abdullah Baul, Air for Life, Bakaho, Tech Pulpo, Acer, Computing Axe, Dylan Verbrancy, Lane, Kyle Chandler Fishburne, Miki Mixerowski, Sack Studios, Kellen B, Jones, Kate Kroc, M, I Am Tristy, Miniman 1964, Wayne Winnix, Sanda, Tommy Hilpuyat, Ki Hirayama, Dennis Erickson, Pat Symes, Angel Sepulveda, RS, Rolo 320D, C39 Pontoon, Fat Brother, hey that's me, Molber 4H1M, Rafael Uribe, Sarvanan, Mo Abbasi, The Minecraft Engine, Ahmed Diab, JDCH4, Vorname Nachname, Ignacio Arrete, Spaceboy, Stealth Strike, Cody Kins, Woodsy HN, Egemen Octai, Joseph Ryall, Lupo Racer, Recycle Nation, Hayden Bush, DS, Karavitis, Garrett McBride, Piss Dragon, and David Thomas.